Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, who is currently operating with an approval rating that, let's just say, is not exactly inspiring confidence. He decided to flex some muscle with an executive order aimed at ICE. I don't know if you guys remember this. And in that process, he tried to nudge the Cook County State's attorney into doing things his way. And let's just say that didn't go so well, because the state's attorney basically reminded everyone, including Brandon Johnson, that she runs her own office, not City Hall, which was basically translation for that prosecutorial decisions aren't directed by press conferences or campaign-style executive orders because you're some local mayor that has a beef with the federal government. And so we touched on this before, but her office made it crystal clear again that this move was an overreach. The mayor does not have the power to stop federal immigration enforcement. He can't override ICE, and he sure enough can't counter federal authority. And now when he tried to extend that reach into another independently elected office, yeah, the door got shut. And now he's left trying to defend a move that looks a whole lot more political than practical. As always, guys, smash that thumbs up button. That's the very best way. It tells me you like the video. Subscribe and stay locked in with the future content. Let's get into it.
Mr. Mayor, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office has pushed back against your ICE executive order. And this is from the Chicago Tribune yesterday. In a memo sent to employees on Friday, the policy chief for Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke said the city's ICE on notice executive order compromises potential prosecutions of federal agents by politicizing the investigations. Do you have a reaction to that?
Well, there's nothing, that I'm doing outside of the frame of my executive authority, which is very simple. My executive order does not dictate or determine what the state's attorney is able to do. What my executive order does, it simply requires our local law enforcement that in the event we have criminal or abusive behavior that is being carried out by federal agents, that information would be documented. We would preserve that information and then pass that evidence along to the state's attorney, where she can decide to move forward with prosecution as she would do with any other case.
At the end of the day, what this really is just political theater, because the Chicago Police Department already have mechanisms in place to document and refer alleged misconduct by federal authority if it happens. It already exists. You don't need some dramatic executive order or press conference. Yeah, and that's exactly what a former top prosecutor broke down about Brandon Johnson's executive order. Take a listen.
But a former top prosecutor says that order itself is completely unnecessary.
If an ICE agent committed a crime, let's say shot somebody and it was an inappropriate shooting, Chicago police have absolute authority to investigate that. They have the authority to bring charges to the state's attorney's office for approval or rejection. So, this is all much ado about nothing.
And so when the mayor steps out and frames this like he's creating some groundbreaking oversight tool, you have to ask if this is about policy or is it about the optics? And so that's why you're now seeing voices inside Chicago calling him out, saying this feels more like a political move than a practical one.
One leading alderman raising concerns about the mayor's underlying motive behind the executive order.
The politics of this volatile situation have cast a shadow over every decision that we're all making right now. It's impossible to ignore that, and I do think the mayor made his announcement and crafted that executive order for largely political reasons.
For someone running one of the largest cities in America, you would think the focus would be on things squarely within his control, not staging symbolic fights that don't change the legal reality on the ground. And that's why the Cook County State's Attorney blasts Brandon Johnson's ICE executive order as wholly inappropriate. But for more, take a listen.
Robin Judy, Mayor Johnson's executive order has come under significant scrutiny since he signed it last Saturday. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office has just completed what amounts to a highly critical legal review that could render the mayor's executive order as it currently stands unenforceable. Mayor Brandon Johnson gathered with political allies and supporters last weekend and made a big deal of his plans to hold accountable any federal agents who violate the law in the course of immigration enforcement actions, whether during Operation Midway Blitz last fall or any time in the future. But the mayor's executive order, which requires police to preserve evidence of criminal behavior and, at the direction of the mayor's office, refer cases to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office for prosecution, is not passing legal muster, according to this memo sent to the mayor's office this afternoon and obtained by ABC7, which said in part, inserting the mayor's office into the already well-established process for felony review of charges is not only wholly inappropriate, but it also jeopardizes our ability to effectively prosecute and secure convictions when federal law enforcement agents have committed a crime.
It is not the job of the executive branch and elected officials in particular to be telling the prosecutor which cases to prosecute, which cases not to prosecute. I think it is critically important to keep political concerns out of criminal prosecutions at every level of government. Our system depends on the impartiality of the prosecutor.
And so when you step back and really look at what's happening here, it's not hard to see the strategy. I don't think this is about discovering new authority or about groundbreaking oversight. It's about continuing to push a narrative that the Trump administration is somehow in the wrong for enforcing immigration laws and arresting people who are in the country illegally. That's the framing. Meanwhile, Chicago has very real problems. Crime remains a serious concern. Public safety is a daily issue. There are neighborhoods that still feel the strain of policies that haven't worked. And yet, instead of Johnson putting his full focus into those challenges inside his own city, this is what the mayor has chosen to prioritize. If I was a Chicago resident, I'd be pissed off. I mean, the property taxes are already pissing people off. This doesn't help. Because when there's so much that needs fixing locally, picking symbolic fights with the federal government starts to look more like politics than actual problem solving. And somehow, listen to this, somehow even Chicago's ongoing crime issue gets redirected back to blaming President Trump. Let's hear him explain it. Take a listen.
Is the president right to say that it was his actions in Chicago, trying to bringing federal agents to Chicago, that made Chicago safer?
He is not. I mean, this president continues to, exacerbate, instability across our country. In fact, where ICE and federal agents were present, we actually saw an increase in violence. In other words, the tension and the chaos that federal agents bring to cities in America, it actually is counterproductive.
I mean, yeah, now you got Mayor Brandon Johnson out here claiming that ICE's mere presence, that's what's creating the violence. I mean, give me a break. Let's really think about that for a second. Could it possibly be that was actually creating the tension of the so-called activists, blocking federal vehicles, interfering with operations, and escalating situations by inserting themselves into enforcement operations? Because the way he's attempting to frame it, you think ICE just showed up and suddenly crime appeared out of nowhere, when we know that's not just the case. I mean, this is Chicago we're talking about. Let's not forget. The city has serious crime issues long before immigration agents conducted targeted enforcement operations. No one needed ICE to show up for violence to exist in Chicago. That's the reality. And so when he suggests that federal agents simply being present is the cause of the unrest, that feels more like a convenient narrative and not a serious assessment of what's actually happening. But here's where it gets even more interesting. When asked directly whether local police would protect residents from ICE, the mayor responded with this. Take a listen.
Mayor Johnson, I actually want to pose a question for you that my Uber driver asked me this week, which is, can residents trust the police to protect them against ICE?
Well, good morning. 40 years ago, the first black mayor in the history of Chicago, Mayor Harold Washington, moved forward on what essentially we call it the Welcoming City Ordinance, or the Sanctuary City, where it prevented local law enforcement from coordinating with federal agents to enforce immigration policy, because what he knew 40 years ago. The trust between community and local law enforcement is paramount to building safer communities. And if the community as a whole does not feel confident that the local law enforcement would indeed serve and protect the interests of all residents, that is antithetical to driving full safety. And so what I've done, I've carried on that legacy to ensure that whether you are documented or not, you can engage with local law enforcement. As a result of that, we've seen historic decline in violence. We had a 60-year low in terms of homicides, much more work to be done. But absent local law enforcement having confidence with local communities, it really prevents for safe communities to actually exist.
Yeah, I can't take this guy seriously. So we're talking about Chicago, right? A place that has had a crime epidemic going on for years now through multiple mayors. It was bad even when Obama was in office, and people got on him because he never bothered to even look to do anything to help drive the crime down in Chicago while he was president. And he lived there. But now we're talking about a city ordinance from 40 years ago as if it's assisting and has been assisting with the reduction in crime. Yeah, I don't think so, guy. Listen, the reality is, has crime gone down in Chicago? Okay, yeah. But some 40-year-old ordinance has little to do with it. How effective was that ordinance when crime was spiraling out of control? Right? And more importantly, crime is down across the country. That's a fact. U.S. murder rate right here, as you guys read, hits lowest level since the 1900 reports say. And so before Brandon Johnson goes tooting his own horn, relatively speaking, Chicago still has a lot more work to do in picking a fight with the federal government to help you do your job as far as cleaning up the streets of Chicago and making it a safer, better place that'll invite more businesses, more opportunity, and better for the residents there. Seems like Brandon Johnson could be using his time a little bit more wisely than worrying about people who entered the country illegally having the ability to remain in his city. But those are my thoughts. Now let me hear from you. Drop your comments down below. Smash that thumbs up button. That's the best way to let me know that you guys are enjoying the content. Subscribe to stay locked in for future videos. And as always, until next time.